If you're a parent, teacher, or school leader, and you're sick and tired of the frustration, anger, and unfair treatment of children at high risk in our public schools, then perhaps it's time for all of us to do something about it. In this podcast, Dr. Amitra Berry brings you tips, tools, strategies, and tactics to build successful solutions while touching, moving, and inspiring all of us to transform our schools so that every child thrives. Here's your host, Dr. Berry.
Frederick Douglass once said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or both." Welcome back, Equity Warriors. Thanks for tuning in. Power. No one is ever going to give up power unless we demand it. We have to have an unwavering commitment to change, and that commitment must be disproportionate to the power that's held by those who would hold on to it. And it is our children, our youth, our students, especially our college students, who have been on the front lines every decade. I want you to remember this name. It's important for today and our context later on. Anna Tabassum. Anna is Muslim. She's South Asian. She wears a hijab, a head covering, for those of you unfamiliar. Anna just graduated from USC with a degree in biomedical engineering. And she didn't just graduate. She was valedictorian, the highest achieving student in her class at USC. Normally, a valedictorian gives a speech at commencement, but Anna's was canceled because of her pro-Palestinian activism, because of her voice. You see, it seems that free speech is only free if you agree with the powers that be. Back when I taught U.S. history and American government at the high school level, I always tried to teach through a lens that my learners could connect to. And I wanted them to understand what free speech really is and how they could impact policy and practice by exercising their free speech. So when I taught them about the 1960s civil rights movement, I focused on the role of students in advocating for civil rights and desegregation. The students of the 60s sat in. They received the blows from water cannons and the bites from attack dogs. They marched. They were beaten. They were jailed. James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner, two Jewish and one black college student working on voter registration in Mississippi, gave their lives. Later, the late 60s and into the early 1970s, we had anti-Vietnam War protests. Student activism at that time did a tremendous job of shaping public opinion and policy. I like to call out the silent protests of high school students in Des Moines, Iowa, that led to the landmark Supreme Court case, Tinker v. Des Moines, that enshrined the right to free speech for students in our public schools. In the 60s and 70s, for anti-Vietnam protests, they sat in again. They marched. They were beaten. They were jailed. Allison Krauss, Jeffrey Miller, Sandra Schauer, and William Schroeder, 19 and 20-year-old students at Kent State in Ohio, were shot and killed by Ohio National Guardsmen. 9 others were wounded for their speech. Speech they had a right to. I think that many of us who are listening may remember the 2011s and the Occupy movement focused on economic inequality, with the student movement focused on rising tuition costs and the student debt burden. the BLM student movement, a sub-movement from the broader Black Lives Matter movement, two movements where we are just now beginning to see the impact of student voice. 2011 Occupy movement, tuition costs, student debt burden. We're now seeing under the current administration, under Joe Biden's administration, we are seeing student debt reduction. We are seeing student debt forgiveness. Who knows how long before we will see the impact of the Black Lives Matter student movement. But think back to the anti-Vietnam War protests and think to now with the student protests happening across campuses in the United States. Students who are protesting against the unjust actions taken against the people of Palestine and Gaza, because these protests of our mostly college and some high school students do follow in that tradition of the protests before them. Our students today are sitting in, they are camping in, they are marching, and at commencement events across the nation, they are walking out. They are still being beaten, jailed, suspended, and denied free speech, even though the Supreme Court said that our children do not, and this is the quote, shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. But they took Anna Tabassum's free speech from her. Every episode, I close with a paraphrase of Dr. Angela Davis, who said, "I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I can no longer accept." I tell you not to worry about the things you cannot change and to change the things you can no longer accept. But change doesn't come easy. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. And as long as we tolerate, as Frederick Douglass said, when they find out what we will quietly submit to, they know what measure of injustice and wrong they can do to us. And we will keep accepting that until we resist with words or blows or both. Pick a lane. Stand in it. Resist. See, you cannot call yourself an ally if you're not willing to put something personal on the line, to risk at a personal level for what you believe in. Personally, I stand with the students who are protesting an unjust war, a war that is harmful to children, war that the international community is now characterizing as a genocide. Where do you stand? Be informed. Stay informed. If you have a child or a young person, whether they are a middle school student, high school student, college student, and they want to protest, listen to them, support them, and do everything you can to keep them safe. I know it's almost summer. School is probably out already. Where you are, it is in many places. But teach your children that they have a right to free speech, and it doesn't stop when the school bell rings. And join me again next week. Don't forget to connect with me on social. News is coming. And as always, don't worry about the things you cannot change. Change the things you can no longer accept. I'll see you next time.
That's it for today's episode of the 3E Podcast. Head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener every single week that posts a review on iTunes will win a chance in a grand prize drawing to win a $25,000 value private VIP day with Dr. Berry herself. Be sure to head over to 3epodcast.com and pick up a free copy of Dr. Berry's gift. Then join us on the next episode.